Hello and welcome to Ask an Author with Julia Kelly. I am really excited to bring you yet another fantastic historical fiction book by another fantastic historical fiction author. So I would love for you to introduce yourself and also introduce the book that we're going to be talking about today.
Oh, that's one thing. I don't even know if I have a copy of it nearby. Oh, I do.
I was going to say, I read it digitally. So.
I was going to say the one thing. I'm Katherine Reay, and my book is The London House. It just came out a couple days ago, so it's early days for it, and I am so excited about it. It's my first historical fiction, and it was incredible fun to research, to write. I loved every aspect of it. So,
I always love talking to authors who are either pure debuts or debuts into a new genre, and historical fiction is such an interesting place to enter right now. So I want to talk to you all about that. But before we do that, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about The London House and what readers will find when they pick this book up.
So they will find a split time story. And I really wanted the past to have relevancy for the future. So the past is revealed through letters and diary entries between twin sisters. And the past is in the interwar years and the very early days of World War II. And there's a secret. Something happens on one fateful night in 1941. And the secret and the misunderstandings and the misperceptions throughout 3 generations of one family have led the contemporary heroine to search out the secret, the truth, and all the implications of what that might mean for her family. So that's a little bit about it.
I'm glad you mentioned secrets, because there are so many secrets layered into this book, and there's secrets layered on top of secrets. And so much of it is about sort of what we say and what we don't say to the people around us. But perhaps when we are talking about this book, we should identify who are our main players here. Who are the women that we're going to meet?
Yes. So you will meet 2, as I said, twin sisters, Margaret and Caroline Waite, and they're the Waite sisters, and they grow up in the luxury of an idyllic childhood in the interwar years. They come of age in the early days of World War II. One lives in France, one lives in England. Now, the contemporary storyline is of Margaret's granddaughter, also named Caroline. Caroline Payne is her last name. And so she is finding out what happened to her family. So those are the 3 primary women. To make sure we didn't have too much confusion between Caroline Waite and Caroline Payne. Caroline Waite goes by the nickname of Caro. And she calls her sister Margot. And they're just a wonderful set of twins, and their sort of world comes to life. And because it's in diary entries and letters, Carolyn in the present time is able to dip back and really learn and change within the moment, because history just sort of is, it's a very direct conversation, which I loved in creating this story.
I think it's so interesting that within this book, we're looking at, and I'm trying to balance very carefully what I say and what I don't say. So correct if I start to go too far, but we're really looking at sort of the stories that families tell themselves, and family history in and of itself. And then obviously it spirals out to a much bigger story as well that has real impact on the war and all of these things. But the relationship between these 2 sisters is so interesting because they're twins. They're so close when they're growing up, but something that starts to fracture. Yeah. How do you show that through diary entries and letters?
Oh, it's really a very fun way to show it. I always think of diaries and entries as a multiple sort of perspective, in the sense that you get what the reader is telling you. I mean, what the writer is telling you, but also you can get what they think about it by what they say. And you can also realize what they're withholding or what they've misinterpreted. And then by having the diary entries go back and forth, you also have interpretation. I believe my sister is lying to me. And then you have sort of her dual conflict about what her sister's saying to her. So it just really became this multifaceted, and you're right, very layered approach to finding out what they thought, what they believed, what they really wanted to convey. And they do become fractured, and you can see the secrets sort of piling up between these 2, and how it makes it so difficult for them to then truly see one another.
I think it's so interesting because as a writer, while I was reading this book, and I'm going to struggle with this word. This is a family joke. I can't say without really thinking hard. Epistolary. So I think I
Yeah.
got it. It's in some ways it's an epistolary novel because you have one section of the novel is completely done through letters and diaries, and then you have this sort of more traditional third person prose portion of the book, which is the present day. And I thought it was so interesting the choice that you made to tell that part of the story through letters and diaries, because I've always wondered, I've never done it before. I've always cheated and put letters and diary entries into a book that also has in that same timeline your sort of standard prose that you would see in a novel. I've always wondered if it would be a challenge and a limitation in terms of what you can write in those entries and those letters, or whether it would in some way actually be freeing because perhaps you say things that you wouldn't necessarily say in person, or you have time to sort of contemplate what it is you're going to say as a character when you actually have the time to sit down and write.
I think it's more freeing because, as I said, I think you have this multi-level approach that I can't do with a straightforward prose. I also found it was more intimate. And what I mean by that is I hand wrote every letter and every diary entry before I put it in my computer. And usually my manuscripts don't see a lot of handwritten time, but to make these more emotive, more personal, I hand wrote them all. And I think the humanity and the longing between these sisters came out a little more because of that. So I find it actually a really freeing sort of format because there's so much play within it, but I absolutely understand that it would be different.
I think intimidating to somebody who hasn't done it before. And I'm so fascinated by the idea of handwriting the portion that would have been handwritten, as your characters would have done it. I know it takes a little bit more time, but I could understand why maybe it slows you down and it forces you to really think before you put things on the page, rather than this sort of, at least with me, sort of, shut off brain, fingers type of approach to first draft, certainly in my case.
That is exactly, you have to do that. You never get that first down. You have to turn off the editor.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's so interesting. Well, I'm curious about your present day Caroline and what her experience is when she sits down and she doesn't know initially that there is this trove of letters in the family. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about what drives her to the London house and leads to this discovery.
Well, an old friend who also happens to be a historian and journalist uncovers her family secret. And it's a good story. And it's a good story in that at the time, we're looking at memorials, ways to commemorate World War II. And in fact, Britain just did that beautiful Versailles memorial in Normandy. And so it was a time of sort of looking back at that. And he is going to write an article about what are the stories we don't want to remember. So he brings up this secret within Carolyn's family, and she realizes when talking to her dad that it has carried a shadow. She now suspects that her whole life has been shadowed by it, and she never realized it before. And there are reasons why. Number one, the story will come out. Matt is under a publishing deadline and he's going to print. But also there are reasons why for her own family and for her father, she needs the truth. And so on this sort of last ditch effort to understand. And I think in a contemporary context, that's something I've always loved in writing. How do we deal with our past to live our best present? And that's what she really is trying to figure out. What has overshadowed my family? And how can I be free of it? Because I don't feel like I'm really enjoying life right now.
Yeah, I think you meet her and she is a very different person than the person that she alludes to and who Matt, I think, alludes to when they're talking about their previous relationship. And of course, you learn more and more about what happened between the two of them and what led her to this point also, which I think is really interesting. I wonder, do you think, so this book starts off in Boston and then moves to London, and we get little glimpses of Paris, very glamorous, through these diaries and letters. Do you think that place and time and setting really matters to these characters? Does it matter to her that she leaves Boston and goes to London, or could in a different alternate version of this, the letters and diaries come to Boston and this book would still have the same resonance?
I don't think so. Place always matters to me, and place is always a character. In fact, it's very purposeful that she comes from Boston, sort of one of those first American cities, old school city. You know, she doesn't come from Chicago, where others of my books are set. So that's very purposeful. I also really wanted to ground her in London. That's a huge part of her family's history. A house and a part of her history that she has either denied or misunderstood. And so it was really important to, and it's named the London House because the house is a character too. It goes through a dramatic transformation, and she needs to be a part of that. That is almost the physical manifestation of her internal journey. So place always means a lot to me. In fact, as I mentioned before we went live, I used to live in London, but yet I had to hop over and do a really deep dive 4-day research trip to just kind of get those elements down that I needed in here and now for her journey. And I did the same in Boston, went there for 4 days and walked the streets and really got the feel of how narrow Acorn Street is, and the bowed street in the middle with the bricks, and who would live there. And what would that feel like? So setting is huge for me, and it says so many things about the character that I think it would have been a totally different story if the letters came to Boston.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to think of. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that the house itself is a character. It is a pretty incredible house. Could you describe to people and give them a little bit more of a sense of this sort of, because I know that area of London very well. I've spent a lot of time walking through it, and I've walked by those, never been into one of those houses, but I've walked by one of those houses. Mm-hmm. What is it that's kind of extraordinary about the London house?
Okay, so number one, I'm going to say this is not it, in the sense that I have a friend who's an architect, and he knows this house, and this house actually is on Regent Street. So, and it's beautiful, but the London house is actually in Eaton Square. And those are these beautiful townhomes, all in a pristine white row built in the 1700s. And behind these narrow doors are these huge houses. I mean, some are 6,000 square feet, 7,000 square feet. Beautiful, beautiful multi-storied homes and multi-generational homes. A lot of them stay in the same families for 200 to 300 years. And that's what this house has done. And it has changed with the family. But because I had not been in one of those houses either, I went on the, like a for sale website, and I toured those homes that were for sale. And so you can see the space and the different decorations and the use of light. So that helped me also with the original sort of decorative feel of it, but how a facelift within the home might turn out and what it might look like today. But they're gorgeous homes. In fact, when I went to London in 2020, I made my family walk down the street and just look at each door, decide which, where on the street I wanted to place the house and everything else. And so it is very situated in Eaton Square.
Well, it's so funny you mentioned the fact that there are these pristine houses also, because they are beautiful, but they're very stark at the same time. And I think that is very representative, certainly of some of the family's history, as you do meet this family through multiple generations. And there is this real sort of formality and distance that some people hold themselves at. And I thought that was just perfect with the setting.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. It is not, they aren't as warm as this house. You're absolutely right. They're bright white, black doors. I mean, they are a little more stark, and they're a little standoffish feeling.
Yeah, they're very elegant, but sort of almost untouchable.
Very elegant.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I have to ask you in this book, because so much of what these characters are doing is the grunt work of research. It managed to make that sound not only really interesting, but also, give it some drama and give it some tension as well, which, kudos to you, because I have done research work like that, and it is not the most relaxing or sometimes the most thrilling thing in the world. But maybe you can talk a little bit about the process of writing research in a book that I'm sure required a lot of research.
It did require a lot of research. So I always liken research to an iceberg. I've got to give you the 10% and it has to feel organic. But if I don't have the 90 underneath, you're never going to believe the 10% above the surface line. So yes, there's about 90% of research that's not in the book, but really all the fun stuff got in, which was great. So the SOE documents, which Matt and Caroline access at the National Archives, that's all real. And I spent 2 days frantically reading through them. And what I want to share with you is how crazy accessible these documents are. Like I got a reader's pass and I got these files and I am just turning these thin pages and there it is in front of me. I have no gloves on, but these are the starting documents of the SOE, which is the Special Operations Executive, Britain's first foray into the true spy world and sabotage world. But they are handwritten in pencil. Dear Hugh, because Hugh Dalton was tasked to start it, the typed memo, and then Winston Churchill, his signature right there. And I will admit, just like I put in the story, I did touch it. I couldn't help myself. I'm like, I'm touching history. So it was so much fun. And it really was, without that trip, that aspect of Carolyn and Matt's journey would not have come to life so much, because as much as research can absolutely be in many ways drudgery to make sure you've got the dates right and you go back and you go back and you go back so as not to mess up, it was terribly exciting too, because it came to life to me. I mean, these were the real documents, and I could hold them and I could touch them, and it was just really exciting.
I think that's something that people sometimes find so shocking, is just what's available to members of the public, so long as you follow the rules and you go through what the archives rules are. But often, especially in the UK, a lot of this stuff is just for public record and available to the public. So long as you can get the slots and times at, Kew or whatever research institution you're going to, it's incredible.
It is incredible. I mean, I had no idea. Even from the States, I was able to, sign up for my reader pass and order my first batch of files. So once I got to Kew, they were ready and waiting for me. And then once I refined, I could order 3 more files every 45 minutes. So you're right. You follow the rules and it feels like the whole world is there for you to research. It was extraordinary.
Did you ever find yourself pulled off into sort of some little, you talked about the iceberg, does the iceberg lead you down a rabbit hole that you thought, no, I have to go, this is another book, this is not this book?
Yes, because as organized as things are, you can still get a file for Egypt. And I'm like, whoa, this was some crazy stuff going on in Northern Africa in World War II. And I'm like, okay, you are not there. You were in Paris and you were in London. Stay focused. So that is true. So if I ever revisit World War II, I'm going to have to see what was going on in North Africa, because those memos were incredible.
I'm always curious talking to authors who, and we spoke about this a little bit before we came on live, but authors who've written in other genres or written books that aren't historical. I've had some friends say to me, I don't know about historical fiction. It's really intimidating. There's all of that research. But my argument back is always, well, if you're not an anthropologist or a publicist or whatever the job is that you're writing about for your character, you're doing research as well in a contemporary novel or whatever it is that you're writing. Was there any of that intimidation when you were moving from one genre to the next, or were you pretty confident, this is what I want to do and I'm going to forge ahead?
Well, I hate to say that I felt confident, but I think I did, because you're right. Even in contemporary novels, there's a ton of research. It's just slightly different. For instance, in A Portrait of Emily Price, which is one of my novels where I deal with an insurance restoration expert, I needed to spend a couple days with insurance restoration experts and learn what they did. I also, because I wanted to show a different type or level of restoration, I was able to get into the Vatican's research and restoration labs, which was extraordinary, but also was research. And I needed to research all the equipment they used, how they used it. And so, yes, you're right. It's a little bit different, but you still need to know, even in a contemporary context, if this is my job, what are all the ins and outs of that job? So I needed to know, say, the restoration expert. So yeah, it's just there was more book stuff in obviously in the London House, because I was researching a lot of dates, movement of armies, policies, politics, historical figures. And there was a little bit more, but it didn't feel all that different. It really didn't.
Well, that's so interesting, and I think first of all, it's a good lesson to anybody who's listening who wants to make the jump into writing historical fiction, because the water's fine, it's lovely. People,
Water is lovely.
we're very helpful. We're a very helpful bunch, and I do think it's sometimes a little bit like pulling the thread of a sweater, and you just find out more and more, and you unravel more and more. But you have to start somewhere, right? And so you just start with whatever the original idea is. So I am going to ask you where the original idea for this book came from.
It came from really the idea of misperceptions and interpretation and secrets. So the idea really did come from what happens when you learned that something you took for granted is different than you ever thought. And then I wanted to bring that Genesis moment forward, not have it be backstory, not have it be hearsay, but bring it forward. Mm-hmm. And that's where the idea of approaching the interwar years and early World War II in historical, bring it forward in a split time novel came from. Just, deal with it on center stage. So that was where it started. And then, as you say, a sweater and a thread, all of a sudden, and I don't even know how I stumbled upon it, but the whole idea of the fashion world and Elsa Schiaparelli and what that said about the time period, these extravagant fashions as late as 1938, and yet war was beginning. It just made this incredible, wonderful dichotomy that existed at the time. And it was really fun to explore that and what that said about the thinking of the time, and what that could mean for Caro, who worked there, and what she could see of coming war, or versus what she didn't want to see.
I think we have to talk about the fashion, because one of the things that I am very guilty of is, as I'm reading, I will have my phone next to me, especially when it's historical fiction, and I will be Googling along, especially if there's something that sounds really familiar. Like I knew about the lobster dress, which I would love to have you describe, but I didn't know about some of these other garments as well. So what was it that was so unusual about this designer? And I have to admit, I stumble across the pronunciation all the time, so you'll have to help me out here.
Elsa Schiaparelli.
Schiaparelli, that's right.
So what is so unusual about the designer is we hear about Coco Chanel, back then, but Elsa Schiaparelli was her rival, modernist designer, haute couture, top of her game. And she also was a very mysterious woman, in that basically they thought she was a German spy. And when she came to the US in, I think, about 1941, 42, might not have, but right around there, the FBI trailed her for the 4 years she lived here. And then she went back to France afterwards, opened, her salon had been open the whole time, and it closed in the 1950s, maybe 54, and it's open again as of 2012, which is really exciting. But we talk about Coco Chanel, but Schiaparelli created, I'm going to show you a picture because I hope you can see it.
There we go. The famous dress.
Famous lobster dress worn by the Duchess of Windsor, who was Wallis Simpson. And she was the woman King Edward VIII abdicated for. If you remember that line, I cannot imagine ruling without the woman I love by my side. And he abdicated the throne to his younger brother, who then became King George VI. But this very provocative dress, 1938, was made of only three layers of silk. And the lobster, designed by Salvador Dali, was originally meant, he wanted it to snatch up, the claws going up towards the Duchess. Schiaparelli did not want that. I gather a fight ensued. Mm-hmm. And though very provocative, less aggressive perhaps, the lobster now points down with the tail fanning the Duchess. What else is, though, That's transparent. So in 1938,
on black and white, but yes, you can see really if you look really closely. Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's transparent. Okay, so now here's another little known story. When the dress was finished, Dolly came to the salon with a huge jar of mayonnaise, fully intending to drench the entire gown in mayonnaise. Schiaparelli said if he did that, she would never work with him again. And we know that he didn't do that because the Duchess is not in mayonnaise. And this was capstone of her trousseau. But also, and I loved this, and I put this in the book too, though I very purposely don't have a picture of it. They did work again. So clearly he didn't follow through on mayonnaise. But this is where you read something and you think one thing, you misunderstand until you see it. I read about their next big dress was called, to me, the Tears dress.
Well, I thought the same thing. And I could not understand the connection between that word and that dress.
Okay, so so real quick, going back.
No, I do, having read your book, I
Yes.
completely understand. And I thought, oh, of course.
Right. But I thought after this dress, it's going to be blue, it's going to be green, it's going to be lighter, it's going to be just this ephemeral creation. And I look it up and it's not tears, it's tears. It is a white silk gown with tears in it, with brown and hot pink and red underneath, as if you are tearing through the gown into the woman wearing the gown. Mm-hmm. So that was mind blowing for me. I was like, okay, you misunderstood that one.
What was it about her creations that you think attracted such not only a celebrity audience, but also a lot of German officers and their wives did a lot of shopping, and that becomes an important element in this book.
Mm-hmm. They were Elsa Schiaparelli was a very strong modernist designer, and I think that actually appealed to German sensibilities as well. And it definitely appealed to her. She often wore motifs on her shoulders and hips that emphasized her body image, structure, whatever. And Elsa Schiaparelli had lots of strong designs. And I think that was very appealing. Now, that was also coupled with very innovative work in silk production and just very sort of really a lot of whimsical things too. In the 1938 circus collection, she had buttons that were crafted into acrobats. And she had, like in the modern collection, which was right before the war, she had a very fitted jacket that had like 30 pockets hidden within it. Mm-hmm. I mean, she was just incredibly brilliant and creative. And I want to come back to the word strong, which is really interesting. One other dress, though, that I hearkened to in the book was this 1936. And it transcends time. One could wear this dress out tomorrow and feel completely exquisite in it. This was her butterfly dress. And Caro sends a very early copy of this dress to England to her sister Margaret, who thinks it's the most beautiful dress she's ever seen. And it represents hope, life, and love to her. And she never wears it, not once. So you have to read why she doesn't wear it. But again, that's a timeless dress.
I was going to say, it looks like it could be out of 1956. It looks like it could be out of, my wardrobe now. In fact, I have a lot of things cut like that. So
I know. So it really is extraordinary stuff. And she was a fascinating designer. I just loved researching her. And I loved putting Caro in her salon because it was so exciting to talk about those fashions where, as you said, the Germans are buying. I mean, they're the ones with the money who are buying her dresses, and war is advancing. And to be focused on this while all of this is happening over here was just a beautiful juxtaposition in time and situation and, ideas. And
well, and there's a small anecdote that you included in the book that I think really shows how powerful some of these designers could be, and what an interesting place and convergence of people these salons could be. Elizabeth de Rothschild walks in and is seated next to somebody she really does not want to sit next to.
Yes, she is seated next to, I think his name is Abet's wife. And he was the ambassador from Germany to France at the time. And he's a Nazi. And this is a true story. She is seated next to his wife, and Elizabeth de Rothschild. I believe she might have been Jewish at the time, but she was a Catholic, married to a Jew. She moved a few seats away. And there are two different rumors, but one story is that Abet's wife did file a complaint against her, and she was sent to a concentration camp where she died. Another story is that she was simply randomly chosen for the concentration camp and arrested. But the two are linked so closely in time that that is a believed sequence of events.
Well, it really shows you that, this is as frivolous as sometimes people think fashion. It's serious, and it mattered to the people who were in these fashion houses. And of course, that also becomes a very large part of your story in terms of what it enables, being very careful here, what it enables some characters to do and enables them to act. And I think it's because I get a lot of questions about why I write books about women in history. And this is a book that centers, a lot of women in history. And I think one of the things that for me is really important is remembering that just because something is, coded as female or as traditionally female, it doesn't make it any less dangerous or interesting or important when it comes to either writing those stories or researching those stories.
I absolutely agree. And I really did find, and this was the first time I really noted it, but as I went through history, it was so obvious. Fashion is political. Just the trends, the statements Schiaparelli was making. You are right. It is an incredibly powerful tool. It was influencing ideas. It mattered. And it did allow, working within those spaces within the fashion world, characters to do other things. Look right, I'm working left, that kind of thing. But you're right, incredibly powerful stuff.
I have a question here from somebody who's watching who says, thanks for such an interesting conversation. Learning about this fashion history is fascinating. Is fashion history something you've always been interested in, or did it come about from your research? And does it feature prominently in any of your other works?
Well, let's see. I've always been interested, but not to this degree. I would not have been able to tell you as I could now, looking at fashion trends, what happened post World War II, what happened to fashion trends in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. I would not have been able to link them to political events, et cetera, as I would now. So that was new for me, and I really loved it. I am trying to think if it's featured in any other books. Actually, in a few of my other books, I do reveal character and situation through design, but one of my books has an interior decorator, and how she decorates her home is indicative of her character change. In another of my books, let's see, I absolutely do look at fashion, but more in comparing and contrasting a set of sisters, one who lives in Seattle and all that someone in Seattle would wear and do, and the other comes from New York, and all that she would wear and do, and how that compares and contrasts with their relationship. So yes, I do use fashion and how we live and what books we have on our bedside table as a way to bring out character, but I've not delved in this deeply. And would I again? Yes, a little bit. My next story does not take place during World War II, and it does not really hit upon fashion per se, but I'm much more careful to draw it out at different times in history within this story to show what's happening and where a character's heart might be, or what she's trying to say by what she wears, or what she can't say by what isn't available to wear. It's a really very interesting. So yes, I have a new tool in my toolbox.
Is interesting. And I love the idea of characterization through either fashion or objects in somebody's home. You know, what does it say when you walk into somebody's house and they have no books on the bookshelves? Or what does it say when, you know, somebody wears the same coat over and over and over again every single day in a book? There's got to be some significance there or some reason why they're doing those things. And so figuring those out as an author, I think is always a bit of a fun game.
It is a fun game. Absolutely. So for you, back to this. Why do you receive a beautiful dress and you never ever wear it? I mean, it's so interesting.
Yeah. I am so curious, and I've asked several authors this, so I'm sort of gathering some data on this. But what do you think it is about World War II that has us continuing to look back, both as readers and as authors writing these stories? What's the draw to this particular time period?
You know, I think there are many. Number one, I think we can understand it within our own time period. I found that in looking at especially as we were just beginning the pandemic, looking at those early years and thinking they feel an anxiety that we feel. Something big is coming, don't know what it is, and we're a little anxious about it. And will the world look the same after it? And so I think there are parallels. Additionally, I think we can reach back. We are now 3 to 4 generations away, and that's not too far to feel a very solid connection. I think it's harder to reach back, at least for me, possibly, because I did not have, say, grandparents in World War I, but my grandfathers, both of them, were in World War II. Another thing, I was talking to my son about this, and I said, why? And he's into history and politics and et cetera. And I said, why World War II and not World War I? And he said, well, World War II, you have an enemy with a face and a voice, and that becomes more real. In World War I, you have a little more separation. You have different forces working, and you don't have that one galvanizing sort of, that's what I can pinpoint the war on. And so I think that's part of it too.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I don't think anybody has brought up the fact that there is that one sort of unifying figure of the enemy in World War II as opposed to World War I. I think that's a really interesting point.
And that was my 24-year-old son. I didn't come up with that one.
Sometimes your kids, I'm sure, can surprise you all the time, I'm sure. Well, I would love to talk to you a little bit about your writing process. I know you mentioned earlier about handwriting some of this book, but when sort of taking as normal a day as there ever is as an author, what does a normal day look like for you when you're writing?
Oh, there are, as you said, there's no normal day, but I'm going to go with an ideal day because I will say first and foremost that being a writer is not the same thing as being an author. And it took me a really long time to understand that. But when you are an author, a big part of your job just becomes marketing. And that is not, as an introvert, my forte. And so I chafe a little bit, not at talking to people, but it's sort of just the business of that. So my ideal day would be, no more than 5 hours of writing, because I also believe that if I don't have the well full of ideas, then my writing is weaker. And what I mean by that is, yes, a bit of research, but also just really good novels. Continually learning how amazing writers say things in different ways. I mean, I will sometimes stop on a page and just go over a sentence again and again because of the beauty of the prose. And so really a mix of writing and reading in a day is pretty idyllic. Now, in terms of someone who wants a little bit of advice in writing, I would say you have to write every day. I don't care if it's a little line in a journal, but writers write. And somebody said to me the other day, he said, well, do you just wait for the muse? I'm like, no. If you wait for the muse, you'll never write a word. What are you talking about? You have to sit in that chair and chase down that muse. And if she doesn't show up that day, you're still writing. So that's what I would say about that. Writers write. And if I can get in my chair and write a bit every day, That's ideal. Absolutely ideal.
I'm with you on that one. I think it's a muscle that you need to exercise, and the less you do it consistently, the more difficult it is to get into rhythm with it. And I think that's especially true when you're getting closer and closer to deadlines. I think the best writing, well, some of the best writing advice I ever got that I did not pay attention to was somebody told me before I had been published, enjoy the time before you've been published. Try not to let it stress you out too much because you're never going to have it again. And I didn't really understand what they meant. And I think what they meant is you're never going to write without the pressure of a deadline, which I like. I used to be a journalist, and so I respond really well to that. But it is different, as you say, being an author and being a writer who hasn't necessarily gone and made the jump to looking to publish, whether that's traditional publishing or independent publishing. But I do think the thing that unifies everybody across the board is if you're an active writer, that's you're continuing to produce material, even if it doesn't go anywhere, even if it, is backstory that never sees the light of day. It's that 90% of the iceberg.
It's so true. But that's one thing I would also say, whether you're published or not, enjoy the journey, because that's where you live. You can't necessarily control the outcome, but you control how you go on that journey. And even if you write the most fabulous New York Times bestseller, you are only as good as the next day when you're in your chair writing the next story. So that's another thing. It's like live in the journey, because that's where it's at.
It is interesting. Yeah. The idea of enjoying it while it happens. I think there's always a pressure to sort of chase the next thing. And I am absolutely guilty of this, but
oh, me too.
Everybody is. There's sort of, you achieve one thing and then you think, well, I can get this next thing. I can hit this list, or I can sell this number of books, or I can sort of get recognized by this book club or review site or whatever it is. But I think enjoying it and remembering that the act of writing is supposed to be fun, even when it's not.
Even when it's not. It's supposed to be.
Yes.
And it's always, but as you said about, the backstory that may never see the light of day. I mean, when I produce and you may be the same way, when you produce like 100,000 word novel, there's probably at least 200,000 words that have gone into it. And all those words mattered. They're not going to be in the end manuscript, but they mattered to get me there. So
yeah, it's funny you say that, because I recently gone over to writing full time. I wasn't before. And one of the luxuries of time has been being able to really finally flesh out backstory in the way that I've wanted to. And so I did a lot of pre-work, a lot of character work, a lot of just writing out what on earth I thought these people were going to do and say, and how they would act and why they were doing the things that they were doing. And again, none of that's going to make it into the book. But it has made aspects of writing the draft so much easier. And so, but it's interesting. Not everybody's like that. So are you a plotter? Are you somebody who just writes by the seat of their pants? Are you diving in every day, doing something fresh and new, and you have no idea where it's going?
So I'm a little bit of a hybrid. I actually liken my process to two different things. Number one is skeleton, where when I start a book, I've got the head, the shoulders, the hips, the knees, and maybe the feet. I have a real general idea of what I want to do. Then I leave the skeleton aside, because that really doesn't work anymore. And I liken it to running the tide up a beach. running the tide up a beach. And I will start and I will go as far up the beach as I can. And then I have to retreat and start on page one again, solidify that and run it up the beach further. It's sort of like the tide coming in. And so there's a little bit of plot and a little bit of pants, because I love to be surprised. And I agree with you. I do a lot of pre-work on the characters, but once I understand these characters, they still surprise me. It's almost like the better I know them, the more they'll surprise me. Mm-hmm. And that's how things change within the story. And those are the best kinds of changes, because if they surprise me, hopefully they'll surprise the reader.
Well, and I think it's something that writers talk about a lot is, what's your character's motivation? Why are they doing the thing they're doing? That grounding your plot in that keeps you from having characters who do completely unexpected things for no logical reason. If you've ever sat there in a television show and thought, well, wait a minute, he was doing that and now he's doing that, and I don't understand why the same person would have done those two things. If you don't have the justification behind it and the reasoning, and you've shown your reader why somebody might have a, change in behavior. I think it's very jarring and very difficult. And it's hard as an author to pull that back sometimes.
It is. You're absolutely right. It's back to that whole thread. It's all connected. So you're right.
Has your writing changed at all due to the pandemic and sort of the life being a little bit more, at home? I know you said you had a research trip for this book, but.
Yes. Oh, that was a crazy thing. I said to my husband in late January of 2020, I think I'll be ready in April. And he said, no, we had one child still in high school at home at the time. He said, nope, she's got a 5-day weekend coming up. Let's just go in February and take her and let's get it done. If he hadn't said that, there's so much richness that wouldn't be in the London house, because the day we flew out of London, London got its first COVID case.
Right.
And I didn't even know what COVID was in late February. I mean, 2 weeks later, the whole world knew. But so yes, then we were home. And I would say my writing has absolutely changed, but my reading changed first. I thought it was fascinating on Instagram. I read, about all these people who were just enjoying this time reading, and they were reading so many books. I had the focus of a gnat. I mean, it was terrible. I mean,
yeah.
So my focus was awful. But what I found engaged me and kept me reading, and I loved, were spy novels. I had never read an international spy novel in my entire life. And all of a sudden, I couldn't get enough of that genre. So it changed my reading, which of course is influencing my writing, because now I have spies in my novels.
What do you think it was about the spy novels that were the thing that could capture your attention at that time?
I think it was plot. They are more plot driven. And I really couldn't go on the ups and downs with a character. Character driven was too emotive for me, I believe. And I write character driven, but I really liked the moving from plot to plot, the intrigue, the scale, the international scale of it all. I think that's really what it was. I think it was the plot base, and it helped me plot as a writer. I mean, talk about stepping out of the way I write and what I write and learning something completely new. It was pretty exciting to back into, by happenstance, a really new facet to both reading and writing.
Do you have any favorite spy novels that came out of that period of time you want to recommend?
First, I launched into everything like Daniel Silva ever wrote. But then I discovered Frederick Forsyth. And I'm not saying Silva isn't fabulous, because he is, but I really enjoyed Frederick Forsyth's novels. The ones I read were all written in the early 80s, kind of Cold War Britain, Europe centric. But they were just, the plots were so interwoven, so many surprises, even little surprises at the end, tiny twists that just changed the whole story, just blew me away. So I've both of those writers I really, really enjoyed.
And how about, have you been able to get sort of into reading a little bit more widely again, or has it?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. So are there any things that you've read recently that you would want to recommend? I know we always get questions about that.
I know. So I'm right in the middle of Our Woman in Moscow by Beatrix Williams, and I'm really, really enjoying that. Let's see, I just read The Rose Code by Kate Quinn. And I love her multiple points of view. I love the pace at which she carries a story. So I found that, just turned the page constantly, stayed up way too late. And what else? Again, I've returned to another Frederick Forsyth, because I just really find the complexity of his writing interesting. But I'm trying to think what else. I've started to read a little more nonfiction again, which is fun.
Any particular subjects?
Not really a particular subject. A friend just handed me Hamilton by Chernoff, and I need to read it, and I hadn't read it, and so I'm digging into that right now. And that's a big book.
It'll keep you busy for a little bit of time.
It is. So yeah, just different topics, just things that cross my way that seem intriguing. But yes, my scope has opened again, which is wonderful.
That is wonderful. It's nice when that happens. I also go through sort of ups and downs where all I want to read is one very, very specific type of thing. And so I'll binge that until I feel like I can face the world a little bit again and read some other things.
Read some
Um,
other things.
Exactly. If you guys are watching and curious about the Rose Code, Kate Quinn was very kind and came on Ask an Author back when her book came out in spring, and so we do have an interview with that as well. If you look at the announcements or the featured section at the top of Facebook, the Facebook page, you'll be able to find that there. I really enjoyed that book as well, and I enjoy her ability to weave a lot of very disparate seeming stories together and then just punch it forward. It's a long book, but it moves.
It does move that, and so did her Huntress. It moved. She does a great job with that. There's no lag time. There's no wondering. You're just propelled from page to page.
Absolutely. I'm very curious about her next one as well. I think there may be assassins in that book. So
I think there are the Diamond Eye. I'm intrigued.
I think so. I saw her talking on Instagram the other day about how difficult it is plotting out assassins plots because they're so complex. So
Oh my goodness. I know. I can't imagine that actually.
Well, if you don't mind, I know you teased it a little bit beforehand, but could you give us a little taste of what we might see from you next in terms of your next book, if you can?
Yes, absolutely. So, as we said, I was a contemporary novelist before with 8 contemporary novels, and I just caught the bug of historical fiction, and I'm not ready to leave it yet. So my next novel it's historical fiction. At the moment, it's a split time, but the 2 time periods, unlike the London House, which are communicated through letters and diaries, these are both sort of real time, running side by side until they merge at the end. And I'm starting in World War II, and I'm expanding a little bit through the Cold War with 2 different strong women. I'm so excited to explore their journeys. And it's been fascinating research, fascinating writing, and I'm loving these 2 women.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I'm very excited to see that. I'm seeing more and more interest in the Cold War. So I'm very curious to see what comes out, especially about that period in the 50s and the early 60s. I think it's really interesting what's going on in Europe and in the United States at that time.
Mm-hmm. So it's been fun. It's been eye-opening. But for me, World War II was eye-opening. There was so much research I had never done and hadn't dug into. So this is equally, just an adventure. It's really, really exciting for me.
Oh, wonderful. Well, we'll have to keep an eye out for that. So if we do want to follow along and make sure that that everybody knows when that book eventually gets a title and a release
eventually gets a title and a cover.
Exactly. When all the things come together, where would people find you online?
Well, on Facebook, I'm at Katherine Reay Books. That's my author page where I am the most, which is really fun. I handle all my own social media. So all the grammatical mistakes and the goofy, that's all me. But I'm on Instagram, Katherine Reay, just smash my name together. I'm also on Twitter, Katherine_Reay. But really, I hang out mostly on Instagram and on my Facebook page. Also, I do answer all my own emails and I do write my own newsletter. So stop by my website, sign up for my newsletter. And if you email me, it'll be me writing you back. So that's actually really important to me. I say I don't enjoy marketing, but I really enjoy personal connection.
Yeah. Connect with readers.
Yeah. So there you go.
And can you remind us again where we can find the London House if people want to pick up a copy?
Yeah. So if you go to my website and you click on London House, all the buy links are there. And what's really nice about that is you'll find, Target and Walmart and Amazon and Barnes and Noble, but you'll also find link to like bookshop.org or Kobo, those ways to get it from your local bookstore too. So it's pretty much, where books are sold, but that's a neat way to directly go to where you would like to buy it.
Yeah, big supporters of independent books. I was raised on a healthy diet of that. So
yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. This has been a wonderful conversation. And again, if you guys are interested in the London House, please do go and pick it up. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Julie. This has been an absolute delight. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you guys again, and we'll be back next week.